What did we get ourselves into, guys? Like, seriously, what did we get ourselves into? DK, Leo, can you back me up here? Or Jake?
Yeah, what did we get ourselves into? I'm already recording.
And so is DK, though, from backup.
Yeah, this is funny.
Anyway, hello, everybody, and welcome to this goodness forsaken video reaction, because guess what we're going to be reacting to? The Britannic movie. Apparently, it's a sequel to the Titanic 1997 movie, but it's a bit cheap. But I'm not going to be alone, thank goodness, because I've got a few guests with us today. So we've got Jake, who is our Mr. Britannic. Hi, Jake.
Hello.
Yay! We finally got you on. We were worried we were going to lose you there for a second. But we also got Leo with us.
Hello, I'm also recording for my channel with my commentary.
But with the commentary, you said as well, Leo, you're going to probably do the explicit version and then us doing the clean version, correct?
Yeah, because I'm going to be doing more explicit stuff when my mic's muted in the actual call here. If you on my channel as well want to see the clean version, History Inside of a Nutshell is the place to go.
Okay, and then also we got DK.
Oh.
It's like a little unsure hello. And then we also got Emmy with us.
Hello.
Hello, and also we've got Alice the dog as well, but she might hear in the background when Emmy is speaking as well from time to time. And then we also got Turkish, and who's going to be me, and we got Jess as well.
Hello.
And we've also got, last but not least, Jem / Jamie N. So we are all a good bunch on the panel there, but I think we're just going to lose our brain cells from time to time, so please bear with us. So it's going to be like a little bit of a challenge. Now, I've never seen the full Britannic movie before, but only short clips, but it is bad. But there have been a few others who have watched it already. So, Leo, I think you are the one that watched it the most. Can you describe it to me in one sentence?
I've seen the film twice. Let's just say the movie would have worked better on the Lusitania in terms of fictional storyline. And it is pain. So, yeah.
Oh dear. And to Jake, you've seen the movie as well. What can you describe to me in one sentence?
Dreadful. Just awful. That's just all I can say about it. It's just rubbish.
Well, we've heard from the two gentlemen who've seen it before, and then the rest of us who haven't seen the whole movie before or haven't before, prepare to get your brain cells explode. So, yeah. So I think without further ado, we will get on to the movie. So, yeah. Oh, Jess, before we go, Jess, do you want to have a comment?
I have also seen the movie.
Okay. Well, what do you think of it, Jess?
Yeah, it's a very bad movie, but I cannot hate it because it's a Britannic movie.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Right, okay. So I think without further ado, let's begin the movie. Prepare to have mind cells blown and tortured.
Also, let me say one more thing. I've also seen this movie like pre-Discord. I'm gonna say it. It's a dumpster fire. Can I mention that the ship at the 45-second mark is not the Britannic? Let me play it back some. There. Does that look familiar?
I believe that's the Justicia.
The Turkish saying Imperator class liner.
It looks like the Justicia. I don't know. It could be. Yeah.
There though, we've got pretty good videos of the Britannic's launch anyway.
That looks like a railway howitzer. That
Oh, it
looks like
is.
a rail-mounted howitzer. An actual railway gun. And that's interesting that I caught that. And my channel's definitely full of railroading nerdy stuff, so fellow rail fans on the channel might appreciate that I'm pointing out railway howitzer. I'm going to be probably look up what type of howitzer that is and do my own video on the howitzer, but it's interesting to see a World War I railway artillery piece actually shown in this movie of all things.
There she is, ladies. The Britannic. Sister ship to the late Titanic.
I'm just going to cut in real quick. So, with the story plot, and spoiler alert for those who don't know, don't know what's going on, but the plot summary is with that female character, she is a nanny or a governess to the children, but she's also been a spy for the British intelligence service, but it's later as MI6. But just so you know about that. Leo, go ahead.
I actually was joking about this myself for my channel here, but I have a friend who can perfectly do his voice, the voice of that guy who was saying she's Britannic, sister to the late Titanic. I have a friend who can perfectly mimic his voice, and it's hilarious. And just side commentary, but, you know, it's a funny little detail.
And Jess, you also had your hand up.
Yeah, he will say is a Titanic sister, but he will forget the Olympic. He will not say the Olympic sister.
Oh yeah, that's true actually. Naughty.
Tell the HMT Olympic about this.
You're home, away from home.
Let us hope she's a little more seaworthy.
It was the bulkheads that did in the Titanic, ma'am. These here on the Britannic go up another 5 decks. Watertight, safe as can be. We've got a second skin of steel, runs the full length of the ship. Unsinkable is what she is.
Oh, marvellous.
They never claimed that the Britannic was unsinkable. Never. The builders never claimed that the Britannic was unsinkable. Also, the double skin did not go the full length of the ship. It only went as far as the bow to the engine room. Never went the full length. It was mainly to protect the bow and midship from a collision such as what happened with the Titanic, which we know is with the iceberg or hitting a rock. It was to protect the forward end of the ship and the midship. It was never there to protect the stern. So it was only there so it didn't go full length. Only went halfway.
Gangway! Excuse me, ladies. Gangway!
If we'd started this war 10 years ago, number one, I would now be in charge of a battleship.
Yes, sir.
Instead, I find myself in charge of a cruise ship.
I think Leo wants to probably explain it, so take it away, Leo.
So, already, their portrayal of Captain Charles Bartlett is absolutely wrong. He loved the Britannic. The Britannic was his ship. He rather loved her, and he did not consider her a cruise ship. Nor was the Britannic, or really any of her sisters, the Olympic and Titanic, a cruise ship, for that matter. They were ocean liners. There is a big technical difference. So the fact that they would portray the captain as, one, referring to her as a cruise ship, absolutely false. Two, the fact that he didn't like the ship that much, which is implied by his attitude, that's absolutely false. The dude loved his ship. I'm already losing brain cells.
It's okay, Leo. But I wanted to jump in a little bit as well, because this is not what Captain Bartlett looked like. It's very, very different. So I think we'll probably leave a picture somewhere around the video, but if you can actually see really closely, the real Captain Bartlett was never like this. No, never as like big, well-rounded, and he never had a beard, and he definitely didn't have brown facial hair either. Jake.
He didn't have that bloody attitude.
Well, from someone who's actually spoken to the family of Captain Bartlett, I can tell you now, he was a very generous and kind man. The crew who served underneath him loved Captain Bartlett. They found him quite a polite and fair man. In fact, in later life, his grandchildren, they were very affectionate with Captain Bartlett. And in fact, I spoke to the great granddaughter of Captain Bartlett, and she said that her dad, when he was a child, Captain Bartlett used to bring the children ice cream. Always brought them ice cream, and he actually called her dad, which would be his grandson, Puffin. That was his nickname for his grandson. He was just a very sweet, generous man. So this portrayal is completely rubbish.
Oh, and Turkish pointed this out. He says he doesn't know if this is correct, but he thinks that Bartlett said on an interview or something that he has said, "I did not leave the ship left me." He's not sure, so it's not 100% positive, but he heard it somewhere.
As I was saying, Captain Bartlett wasn't actually the first choice for Britannic. The first choice was actually Captain Haddock. The White Star Line actually requested for Haddock to join the Britannic, but the Admiralty refused that request because they would not release Haddock from his duties in Belfast. He was training soldiers on dummy battleships or something like that, and they would not release him. And Captain Bartlett was actually put in charge of Britannic in replacement of Haddock. Captain Bartlett was actually appointed the superintendent of the White Star Line in January 1912, and as we know, he was involved in the Titanic inquiry. But yes, as Leo said, Captain Bartlett loved this ship. He actually saw Britannic from construction until, as we know, her eventual death. So he was very affectionate with this ship.
Ship in the world, sir.
But I do hope our quarters are not too far.
Not at all, madam. In fact, we have great pleasure allocated you the statement.
The men say Britannic was the largest ship in the world, but she was not. She was not the largest ship in the world. She was also not the largest ship from Britain.
Yeah, the Britannic was the same size as her sister ships, 882.9 feet in length. So yes, she was not the largest ship in the world at the time. That belonged to the German line, unfortunately. But that's yeah. So there we go.
There we go.
Boo. Boo to the Germans.
But anyway, Captain Bartlett's line on like commanding a battleship, that was a moment and a half, because I feel like that at this point it's common knowledge that like naval warfare wasn't really like the biggest thing in the First World War. So like, what is the point of this man having a battleship to command in the first place? But a country that is mostly blockaded and wasn't having like major naval engagements like like Great Britain. So it was like, in that context, that line does not make sense.
Hey, Jake. Well, by the way, thanks for that.
Captain Bartlett wasn't in charge of a battleship before he took command of the Britannic. He was actually in charge of a armed sailing ship, and her name was the HMY Verona. Before he took command of Britannic. So he wasn't in command of a battleship, or he was never considered to take command of a battleship. He was, before Britannic, he was in charge of an armed sailing ship.
Yeah, that like, now you say that makes a lot more sense, because when they have the line of like, oh, like I could have been commanding a battleship, I was like, huh? For why? For what reason exactly?
This cab. Good heavens.
Not yet underway, and one of them's got the vapors.
Everything's fine. Probably the excitement of Leaving home. Being on board ship. Have you ever sailed before?
Yes.
A pleasure cruise, perhaps?
No.
I love being at sea. What was it Byron said? Roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. 10,000 fleets.
So, the hair. I think Boss did mention that. Yep, short boss were fashionable for women until the 1920s. It's also the fact that like short hair wasn't a thing until like the mid 20s. So yeah, this is like way off for a movie that is purportedly set in the year 1916.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like the fashion history, like for I look at that the hair from like the one of the like the female character we just see a minute ago, and I was like, nope, that some one of these things is not like the other. Short hair wasn't a fashionable thing until like the mid 1920s. So like we're talking 1925-ish, which is like 5 to 10 years after the events of the Britannic. So I was like, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense.
But there were not children on the ship.
That part
When
too.
the
Thank
ship
you.
was built. When the ship,
Yeah, it's also in the middle of a war. Why on earth do we have children on a ship?
Yeah, it's a hospital ship. Why are there children?
I'm pretty sure there were teenagers on board. That's actually why I raised my hand in the chat before Sez brought up the teenagers. I thought there were teenagers on board the ship because weren't they part of like a scouting troop or something? Like I forget details, but they weren't children. They were teenagers. There is a difference.
Yeah,
There is a difference.
Also, what the hell is this dialogue? It's saying stuff like pleasure cruise. What? Cruise ships were not common back
my
then.
dear
This
God!
dialogue
Like this is a hospital ship. Like pleasure cruise are not.
It was in reference
cruise
to
are occupied territories.
He'd been on before. He said, "What? Perhaps you'd been on a pleasure cruise." To our person who's standing in for Violet Jessup. Like, oh my God.
Well, I think with the teens, with all that, I'll let Jake explain. There were teenagers on board, but with the scouting. So, Jake, would you like to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I think we did a video not long ago about the scouts. But yeah, there were scouts on board. They were sort of, as they called them, boys back in those days. So they weren't quite adults. They weren't quite children. They used to call them boys. And they had sort of different jobs. Some would, you take command of the elevators, so they would, bring people up and down in elevators. Some would be the captain's, go-between, shall I say. I think that was actually a Boy Scout Ireland. But I couldn't, forgive me if I can't remember all their names because there was so many. But they had different jobs on board. In fact, Mackenzie, Scout Boy Mackenzie, he was in charge of blowing the ship's whistles for the captain. And, like I say, they had just different jobs, and that's what they were on board to do. It was to build skills for them, life skills, and first aid and things like that. So, yeah, that was why they were on board. And thankfully, all of them survived. So, and they came from two different types of scouts. Some came from Liverpool, and some came from the Southampton Boy Scouts. Forgive me, I do not know the name of the Liverpool Scouts, but they were the Southampton Scouts, and then there was the Liverpool Scouts. So, and in fact, Mr. Pearman, Boy Scout Pearman, when the sinking happened, he was dangling from one of the ship's from the boat davits, from the rope, and Violet Jessup recalled seeing this boy, and she said, "Oh, jump into the boat," and he wouldn't. He just wouldn't let go, and he ended up sliding down after he saw the boat getting cut up by the propeller, and he suffered with PTSD for the rest of his life because he saw such gory things when he saw that boat being chopped up. There was people being cut up, and it affected his growth. When he slid down into the water, he actually burnt his hands with the rope. But yeah, although they survived, they would have seen some awful things as the ship sank. But yeah.
Something.
10,000 fleets sweep over thee in vain. Man marks the earth with ruin. His control stops at the shore.
That's it, exactly. Extraordinary. Is there anything else I can do for you, Miss Campbell?
I'm fine now. Thank you.
Lady Lewis's governess, sir, to see you. Miss Campbell.
A governess? Very well.
Captain.
I trust that Lady Lewis is feeling comfortable.
Quite comfortable, sir. May I speak to you alone? It is a matter of some delicacy.
Very well, very well. Found it. Now, what is it, Miss Campbell? I have a ship to run.
My instructions are to speak to you alone, sir.
Mr. Townsend is my first officer. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of him.
You may count on my discretion.
Very well.
Secret. Good God, you're with military intelligence?
Yes.
You?
Are you upset because I'm an intelligence operative, sir, or because I am a woman?
This in real life didn't never happened. What she is doing.
Also, I don't think Bartlett would have been that disrespectful either. I doubt Bartlett would have been that disrespectful about the ordeal either. Considering, didn't they actually take a wounded German soldier in on, their 5th voyage? Like, I doubt Bartlett would have been that disrespectful. Just in general. Look how they're massacring my boy.
Well, to be fair though, hospital ships' purpose have one goal, is just to save lives, no matter whose side it is. Of course, they're going to take on some of their own.
Yeah.
They're going to take on some of the enemy's sides, because that's normal.
I also said that, because when Leo just said that they took in a German soldier on their 5th voyage, I would think it would be very, very plausible, considering, like that at that point, as DK actually say, the rules of the Red Cross is that you have to save everyone, no matter what affiliation they are with. So I think that they would be, they're just doing their job, but at the same time, this is a bit on par with like the British sensibilities on sex and gender parity, especially with 1916 being the time where the suffragette movement is still a really, really touchy subject. So it is debatable whether or not like something event could happen, but in the knowing that someone has said that Townsend was not a real person, like I doubt that it would go exactly as we see here in the way that the movie portrayed.
And Jake, I see you got your hand up.
Oh, just to let you know, it did matter. It mattered big time, which people they were taking on board. They would never have allowed the Germans to be on a British hospital ship. They were there under the British Admiralty. They were there to run as a British hospital ship. They were only there to take on British patients, British soldiers, and it did matter because when because there was an incident on the 5th voyage, where they did take an Austrian patient on board, and it caused a lot of problems. The Austrian patient, he did report back saying that there were soldiers on board the Britannic, and that there was something very illegal going on that he thought was going on the Britannic, such as boxes, as he thought could have been ammunition. So it did cause a problem. And, you know, Britannic was, hospital ships were becoming very, what's the word, not in the best of light with the Germans, because they thought that the Germans, that the British were using hospital ships to carry ammunition on board the ships as war contraband. And, you know, like I say, it wasn't long after when Britannic sank, the Germans did start sinking hospital ships, British hospital ships. So the rule book just sort of got thrown out of the water, out of the window, because under the agreement was there was an international agreement that any ship flying under the hospital flag or painted up as a hospital ship would not be attacked. But that, after the Britannic, it seemed to have been thrown out of the water, out of the window, because only in 1917, the HMHS Donegal, which was a hospital ship, was torpedoed by a German U-boat in the English Channel. So it did matter what patients they were carrying on board a British hospital ship. It wasn't seen in the best of light if they were carrying enemy on board.
We have reason to believe there is a spy on board.
A spy here? That's absurd.
Perhaps he wants to report on the accommodation, sir.
The Germans believe you are carrying munitions.
Let me assure you, Miss Campbell, and any...
Jess?
There were not spiders on board. There were not.
Germans who may be listening, this is a hospital ship. We are carrying medical supplies. Yes, indeed, we do have some small arms on board to secure the ship. And yes, indeed, there is a Lewis gun on the...
I'll also point out that is actually a huge violation of the Geneva Convention. Hospital ships are not allowed to carry any small arms whatsoever to defend themselves.
Jake, I might have to add in in there, because we made a recent discovery about that, didn't we? So Jake, do you want to explain a bit about that?
As I said, that you know, there was the Austrian patient on board who said that he did see soldiers and boxes being brought upon on the ship, which he took as probably war contraband, such as ammunition and things like that. This is where I say that hospital ships were becoming, you know, controversial with the Germans, because they did think that maybe the British were, you know, bringing war contraband on the ship. So yeah, like I say, the German, like I said, the Austrian patient did not paint the Britannic or you know, Britannic in the best of light at all. And he was treated quite bad. Well, not badly, but he wasn't treated with the best of respect by the crew or the staff on board. He did complain about that quite a bit, how he was treated so badly on board the Britannic. But then he was part of the enemy country, so obviously he wouldn't be treated. He would be treated very suspiciously. But they have got it kind of mixed up a little bit, because they were German spies on the Lusitania, but there was never a German spy on the Britannic, especially on its last voyage.
So, Jess, also got a question. With soldiers on the same side, like, let's say for Great Britain and her allies, would they also be on the Britannic if they were allies? Like, can a French soldier who was wounded in combat be on the Britannic?
Possibly. I mean, the French were also enemy too, and they were part of. They did, you know, join the Germans, and so they were seen as enemy. But we have to. But the amazing thing is that when the Britannic sank, the crew of the Britannic actually said that the surviving crew said that they were treated very well by the French. In fact, in some cases, they were applauded after the sinking. I believe that was Captain Bartlett who recollected that in his letter that he wrote on the HMS Royal George, how he was treated so well, and the crew was so treated so well. I think it depended which side of the war you was on. Yeah. But I think mainly the Britannic was there to serve the British, and to bring on British patients, not anything from other countries. It was just there for it was running under the British Red Cross. So it was there for the British, really, not any other nationality.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's at this point. I hope strongly that we already know that the ships like Britannic would have been run under British Red Cross, knowing that they are still quote unquote Red Cross ship, which they still have to make sure that affiliation disregarded in a way, they will still have to save everyone, but they would have to have a priority to prioritize British patients and British soldiers because they're still technically a British subject. Like this is every ship, every Red Cross ship for every country, really, unless that they are flying directly under the Red Cross and without any country affiliation, which rarely ever happened in this time. The second part is, well, a lot of what you guys I've heard for the past 5 minutes, it's actually saying that it practically does not negate the issue on the Red Cross and the role of Red Cross vehicles, including the potential for Red Cross ship to be used as a way to bring in contraband. This has happened before, and it happens again after. So this is the reason why that medical facilities are repeatedly targeted, even now. So yeah, that's kind of what I have in my mind right about that.
So on the point of the mention of small arms and other stuff, technically Lusitania was the one that was carrying contraband, as I recall. And I think I made a comment earlier that this movie would have been better as a fictionalized plot about Lusitania, simply because they seem to mix a lot of details between the Britannic and Lusitania around.
I just want to add as well that when Jacques Cousteau found the Britannic, one of his first missions or one of his first goals was to go inside the Britannic's holds, because to a Frenchman, it would be of great interest for him to see if the Britannic was carrying ammunition, because that would give the Germans the right to sink the ship. So that was one of his first missions, but he never actually found anything. The holds were only, what he said, they were empty, but what he could see was that she was carrying boxes of medical supplies in the holds, but there was no ammunition ever found. But to a Frenchman, it would have been of great interest to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to His Majesty's Hospital Ship Britannic. I am Captain Bartlett. We are engaged upon a noble mission to bring aid and comfort to men who have offered up their lives in the defense of their country. In 7 days' time, God willing, we shall arrive at the Greek island of Mudros, where we shall embark some 3,000 wounded soldiers. You young ladies have volunteered to help them on the...
I'm probably going to just stop right here because I know we've had a little bit of a long pause, but we'll probably edit things down really just to save time. Anyway, so I've noticed that everyone was looking and staring at each other, and I'm wondering, in the movie, they are showing that there are double agents or German spies on board. Was this true or was this false?
No, no German
No.
spies. No, none at all.
Yeah, so that's probably fictionalized then. It's creative licensing.
Yeah.
Not to mention at the beginning it says based on true events. Like, what true events? Oh, Jess got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just
No,
about to say Jess's name.
I went also stay with German spiders. That's what Jess say. German spiders. There were no German spiders.
Isn't it a bit dangerous having the bulkhead doors open like that? What happens if we hit a mine?
We only do it for the shift changes, morning and evening. Takes no more than 15 minutes or so. We'll lock it down good and tight, don't you worry, sir.
Right.
Beg your pardon, sir.
Yes?
Stoker Evans, sir.
What is it, Evans?
If I could talk to you for just a moment, sir.
Oh, yes, of course. Walk with me.
I don't mean to take up too much of your time.
No, it's quite all right.
It's about my boy Tom.
Yes?
He's not well, sir, and the doctors don't seem to be able to help.
When I was looking at the Stoker's costumes, I was like, oh, because that's not the right attire. They would never wear white sailor suits like that. Like the ones that you see at Macmillan Tires, they never wore something like that. It sounds like someone was doing lazy research right here, and that is the most annoying thing I've seen ever. Get your research done right.
They'd also be covered in coal dust, hence why they're called the Black Gang.
Do you want to know the most interesting part about this? Is that Simon Mills himself was a historical supervisor on this movie. Simon Mills was actually hired as a historical advisor for this film, and in the end, he actually wanted and he requested for them to take his name out of it, or out of the credits, but they didn't. They didn't take his credit. They didn't take. He requested take him out of the credits, but they never did. They kept him in.
Oh, that is dumb.
It was so badly done.
That is so dumb.
Simon Mills himself.
As hell. Jesus.
Yeah. Simon Mills himself was on this, and he said it was that bad. He just wanted to be out. He didn't want to be association. He didn't want any association with this film at all. But they kept him in anyway on the credits, and to this day he would not admit freely that he was involved in this film, because literally everything that he suggested, everything that he suggested, historical wise, they just threw it out. They just didn't listen. So I don't see the point of them hiring him in the first place.
That's so dumb. Because literally, why would you disrespect someone's wishes and ignore their historical advice? I do not get that. I really do not get that at all. That's just kind of lazy, if you ask me.
It was funny because me and Simon Mills was literally having a laugh about this, and because we was talking about it, and he explained that he was involved, but he wanted to be taken out of it, and they wouldn't. They just kept him in. So it's he said to me, he freely does not admit he was involved at all.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have. I just saw a video. I mean, if anyone here know Carolina Zabrowska, she actually had like a video to satirize this issue of like historical movies being strangely not historical with so many aspects. And one of the quotes that stuck with me is actually when one of the character in her skit said, "We don't want realness, we want magic." This is it. We don't want realness, we want magic, but neither is correct in here.
Joey the Lion actually says something. He said, "I'm not sure if it's the same here, but I can see the concerns regarding the fire. In railroading, you need to have a good and level of bed of coal and not have too much, otherwise it could spit out fuel and will waste coal." And also, actually got another complaint about those Stoker uniforms. They can get hot and stuffy. I want to point something this out right here is that with the U-boat speed and of course the Britannic speed, there would be no way they would keep in pursuit with the Britannic whatsoever. Even if the sub is underwater, it still would not catch the ship.
This is the clip I have seen before. So, spoiler alert, for those who haven't seen the clip before. So, this clip is a thing of PTSD because the girl, I can't remember who the girl's name was, but the girl did survive the Titanic disaster. And from the scene, you can see that in the final moments of the sinking, she was still in her cabin, and I believe it was third class, but I don't know. But one of the portholes exploded into water, and she nearly drowned, but she managed to find a way out in the water to reach to a lifeboat. But I swear, this didn't really happen in real life because the porthole doors were left open. And I've heard there were some people that got sucked into them, but I never seen or heard of people. Well, I haven't heard of survivors swimming out from the ship into the water to swim away from the Titanic from the portholes. I could be wrong, but this is another case of artistic licensing.
Hello. I will point out that there were actually 3 Titanic survivors on board the Britannic at the time of her sinking. There was Arthur John Priest, and there was Violet Jessup, who was one of the most famous ones, and there was Archie Jewell, who was one of Titanic's 6 lookouts. Archie Jewell was an able seaman on board the Britannic, and he, just like Violet, was pulled into the propellers as the ship sank, and he luckily survived just like Violet. But there may have actually been another one. We've actually been looking at a Walter Hurst who may have been on the Britannic, and it's more likely on the Britannic, and it's more likely that he was on the Britannic at the time of her sinking, and he was a quartermaster on board the Britannic. So it is possible, very possible, that he was on the ship. But Vera Campbell's story is very loosely based on Miss Violet Jessup, very loosely.
I have to say, really, even though it's just a dream sequence, the final plunge of the Titanic doesn't seem quite right to me. I mean, they did get the breakup, that's fair dues, but the stern felt like it was just up and then it's just bobbing up and down and sinking back down. That definitely never happened. Even though he's on mute, Joey wants to type, and so does Leo. Unless anyone's got a say to add.
It's just like, even though in Titanic 666 she only sinks in one piece, even Titanic 666's beginning sequence of Titanic sinking just feels a little bit more accurate in terms of the way physics. Just by a touch.
Joey said, I think that can be more brushed off as someone misremembering the sinking, which could be typical of dreams, to which that can actually do happen.
Das nicht schaffen. Und wir werden das Schiff versenken müssen.
Sie sind ja Spezialisten. Sie müssen mir Vertrauen haben.
Bestätigen Sie unserem Freund den Empfang der Meldung.
Gonna have to pause right there again because this scene with one of the crew members being a sympathizer for the Germans, that actually kind of reminds me of another ship and not the Britannic. But I'm gonna let Leo do a sound on the soundboard first. So Leo, the floor's all yours. What sound are you gonna make?
All I have to say is just watching how he jumped down there just immediately made me think.
Oh, I love that. Anyway,
Immediately.
General Obi-Wan Kenobi join here for a minute.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, yeah.
Someone need to play the General Grievous one.
Too
many Star Wars references. Too many Star Wars references.
Oh, yeah, of course. But anyway, there was another incident with a ship that had something like this. But I think, Jake, do you want to explain it a little bit more? I know I'm going to do a video on this at some point for the channel, but do you want to explain what it is? Because I think you're very good at explaining that.
What's that, sorry? Just repeat that, sorry.
The ship, that's similar into the movie, but on a real life ship where there were German spies and some crew members who were German sympathizers.
Oh, do you mean the Lusitania?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, the Lusitania had 3 German spies on board the ship. And they were actually caught by some of the crew on board the ship, including Staff Captain James Anderson. He was in charge of keeping them below decks, and there was also there was Detective William Pierpoint, who was involved with interrogating the 3 German spies. They did not survive the sinking. They did drown in the sinking. I suppose it was the best interest of the British to have them go down with the ship. I don't even think they were even considered to survive. So that's what happened with the Lusitania. There was 3 German spies on the ship. They were locked in a cabin below decks. Yeah.
Dreadful having an exercise in the middle of the day when the sun is directly overhead.
Stop it!
William, stop pestering your sister.
I'm not pestering. You are so pestering. I've seldom been so pestered.
Let's all behave, shall we? Now pay attention.
You're as white as a ghost, Vera. What is the matter?
There is nothing the matter, Mom.
A boat filled with beautiful women. Has any man ever been so fortunate?
Oh, Chaplain Reynolds.
At your service, ma'am. Miss Campbell. You feeling all right?
There. You see?
Right there, because I want to explain a little bit about the lifeboat drills. Now, looking back at the Titanic disaster, the lifeboat drills were a common practice, and the White Star Line were very dedicated to each lifeboat drill because everyone always assumes when it comes to Titanic, a lifeboat drill never took place. That is not true. And it was very standard practice to have multiple drills for the White Star Line, and they had one at different times during the Titanic's voyage. And there would be a very special drill on a Sunday morning, which, of course, probably would have happened for the Britannic, because moving forward to it, the Britannic, they would have had the same, because it's recorded in one account, and I believe that's Violet Jessup, that the lifeboat drills were called every morning before breakfast, so probably before 8 a.m. at most, from what I understand. But after the Titanic disaster, now I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that following the Titanic disaster, there was some or all vessels that were managed by a staff captain, as well as having a regular captain, and that came after the Titanic. And this is what I heard, because I could be wrong. So if you guys think I'm wrong, please back me up or say something, because I really, really will be grateful for that. But yeah, I thought I would just explain a little bit, really.
Days at sea. sea, and Miss Campbell will be as ruddy as a sailor.
Oh, really, sir? I do not think Miss Campbell would benefit in the slightest from being ruddy.
Quite right. She's perfect the way she is.
You flatter me. I'm sure Lady Louise would agree I could stand some improvement.
Oh, nonsense, dear. It is only that I worry about you. Poor thing.
Step forward, please. You will be assisted onto the boats by a crew member. Pay attention to his instructions, for they may save your life. This way, miss.
Really interesting though with the lady with the umbrella. I don't know if you would actually wear that when you're going to a Greek island, but she looked like she was going to the jungle in Africa, and that's what made it a little bit hilarious, like she was going to go on safari.
You also see the mock-up attempts of the Gantry davits as well.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Leo, can you explain a little bit more about that?
So it kind of looks like there's mock-ups of Britannic's Gantry davits, which were essentially giant crane-like davits that were added to Britannic in the wake of the Titanic disaster. And if I recall right, they were powered by electricity, and the reason why they were so key for being added to Britannic is because couldn't they lower lifeboats and launch them faster than the people on Titanic could have? Like, correct me if I'm wrong for thinking that, of course.
Jake?
Yeah, I can explain a little bit more about the Gantry davits and why they were added. The Gantry davits were added, as we know, in the wake of the Titanic disaster. They needed an efficient way to get passengers or the nurses and doctors, as would later happen, to get them off quickly, very swiftly. And what the Gantry davits were able to do was they were able to launch a lifeboat in the event of a severe list to the vessel. And originally there was supposed to be 8 Gantry davits added to the Britannic. There was supposed to be some on the stern, and there was one supposed to be added on the port side of the ship on the forward end. Now, the reason why, and there was 2 other vessels that had these sort of Gantry davits, but on a very smaller scale, which one was another White Star vessel, which was the RMS Doric. She was another vessel that had these Gantry davits. Now, the original 8, there was only 5 added to the Britannic when she became a hospital ship, and that was purely because of how quickly she was put into hospital service. They just didn't have the time to fit all 8 of them to the ship. So to make up that, they had to add the old type Welling davits to the ship to add more lifeboats to, obviously, to please the British Board of Trade. And as we know, in the Britannic sinking, that they did work. And they worked very swiftly, and they worked exactly how they were designed to do. There was only one that actually ended up getting jammed, which was on the port side, on the aft end, but that really did not impede in the evacuation of the ship. But yes, they were electronically operated. There was a switch box on the boat deck which you could electronically bring them in and out. And that's the history of them. But they really did not take off in the general shipbuilding business at all, because they were so heavy and so expensive to construct and to add to a vessel. And obviously the Britannic had to be modified to withstand the weight of these Gantry davits. She had to be modified in 8 different places. She had to be strengthened in 8 different places and stiffened to take these Gantry davits on board.
Jess had a hand up first, and so did Leo. So I'll let Jess go first.
Also, I thought Olympic also was the Gantry davit, but did not the Gantry davit on the Olympic.
No, the reason why the Olympic didn't have them was because the Olympic was not sufficiently modified to withstand the weight of these Gantry davits. If the Olympic was to have these Gantry davits, she would just be top heavy and she would just roll over.
Yes.
She just wasn't able to take them.
True.
So, big question here. Considering she only had time to get 5 fitted, were all 8 of her Gantry davit sets actually made, or did they only make the 5 before she was launched? Because you said they only had time to fit 5 of the 8, but were all 8 actually made already, or were only 5 actually made by that point?
There's no record of any other Gantry davits being built. I suppose there would have been, but because I think these Gantry davits, the 5 were already fitted to the ship. But you have to remember that Britannic was laid up for 6 months before anything was done to her. And she was still painted grey from the day when she was launched to the day that she was requisitioned. And you've got to remember that the reason being is that the White Star Line owed a lot of money to Holland and Wolff. They owed at least £585,000 to the Holland and Wolff company. So construction of the Britannic really slowed. It didn't halt altogether, but it was slowed. But there was no. I've got no evidence to suggest that the other Gantry davits were ever completed or ever made, or there's no reason why they were not added. The only reason that is suggested is that because Britannic was so swiftly put into hospital service that they just didn't have time to fit them all.
You're afraid?
Yes.
Tell me.
I was on the Titanic when she went down.
Were you alone?
No. My husband was with me. He didn't survive.
Jess, go ahead.
Oh, if she plays Violet Jessup, she did not have a man on the Titanic in real life.
I've been told the ship is unsinkable, and yet here we are, being shouted at and told what to do in case it does sink. Kind of confusing and contradictory. I beg your pardon. Have I interrupted something?
No, of course not.
My dear Miss Campbell, the men work the lower decks of a ship like this will sometimes seek out a dark place in order to rest. Now, this may be dereliction of duty, but it hardly amounts to being part of a spy ring.
Doesn't it strike you as odd that 4 men looking for a place to rest should come together on the same...
Okay, just right over here is the Marconi wireless set. Now, I doubt that there was a Marconi wireless set on the bridge, because on the Titanic and the Olympic, the Marconi wireless had its own room and the operators had their own beds. So I doubt that the way it's portrayed in the Britannic, I doubt that there was a Marconi wireless set on the bridge. Because I'm sure that the Britannic had her own Marconi wireless room. And, Jake actually said something. Hang on a second. Jake says there was 2 wireless operators on the Britannic. Right, Jake, can you say more about that?
There's not much known about the wireless operators themselves. There's not much history on them, but they were not down as wireless operators to be honest. They were actually down as telegraphists, not wireless operators, which is kind of interesting. But there wasn't much known. But yes, the wireless machine was not on the bridge. It was in the same spot, the same place, and located in the same place as Titanic and Olympics. And the interesting thing is that the Britannic's wireless room was very similar to the Olympics, whereas Titanic there was a silent room, and then there was the thingy. But the wireless room on the Britannic was very similar to the Olympics, and also there was actually a telephone added to the wireless room on board the Britannic, because what it was, what they found with the Titanic is that the officers had to leave their post to get a message to the wireless operators. And so what they did with the Britannic, they added a telephone which was connected to the bridge. So they were able to give commands to the wireless operators from the bridge without them having to leave the bridge itself, which was just an extra added safety feature that was put onto the Britannic in the wake of the Titanic disaster. So, and as we know, that in the sinking, the wireless was actually disconnected to a certain extent. The cables that ran from mast to mast actually snapped due to the flexing of the ship as it rose out of the water. The bridge sort of the bow sort of lifted a little bit because of the mine collision and the mine impact, and that sort of whipped and sort of stretched the cables, and then they end up snapping, which then they were able to send a distress call, but they were not able to receive any messages back. So they'd actually lost connection to the silent room of the Britannic. But again, they were still able to send out a message, but just weren't able to receive a reply back.
Spot on such a large ship. Is it likely that they would congregate for something best?
Oh, and Jess also wants to point out one more thing, that Britannic also have motorized launches with a Marconi wireless set on board them. So I want to add in that little interesting fact there.
Stand alone. If you had seen them, sir, you would know they're up to something.
Very well, Miss Campbell. I will look into the matter if that will set your mind at ease.
Thank you, sir.
Miss Campbell, whilst you are roaming my ship, do try to remember your condition.
My condition?
You're a woman. Do try to behave like one.
I saw Jess's comment in the Discord chat saying that also the Britannic had motor lifeboats with radios. Now, I'd never heard of motor lifeboats having radios before. So, if someone knows, is there any more detail into this?
I think what Jess is mentioning is that there's two motorized launches on the Britannic. Even the Aquitania also has two motorized launches on each side. There's one on starboard, one on port side. And they each have a Marconi set on board these motorized launches. Just realized I said that, and all of a sudden I realized my mic wasn't on.
Oops.
Yep. Whoops. Stuff happens, unfortunately.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the...
Now, I've got to say, the CGI with the lights, oh, such cheap animation. I'm sorry, but it's really cheap. I don't like it.
Yep. Oh, and Jake also brought up the two names of the Marconi operators, telegraphists, F.N. Calvert and T. Cleverly. Those are the operators that were on board the Britannic at the time frame.
The epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity.
What do you think, Chaplain? Does God pick sides?
Well, of course he'd be on our side, wouldn't he?
And with so many men dying on both sides, I wonder if he favors either of us.
That is a terrible paradox. War is the perfect expression of free will.
Oh, we're going to have to pause right there, but I don't really like this scene at all, because considering it's the First World War, it's nothing like that, because you wouldn't have grand, elegant dinners in the First World War, because food would be rationed, and some of the food, now this is what I found in my latest research, and again, I could be wrong, but there are most foods, especially meat, that they were put up in tin cans. And I'm not too sure if it's the case where meat in tins were cooked on board ocean liners, but considering it was wartime, a lot of food was rationed, and having dinners like this, I'm not too sure if it ever happened, especially by candlelight. Surely there must have been electric lights in the room. This is... Oh, god damn, this is awful. This is too awful. I'm losing my brain cells already.
This is like a romance dinner here. It's like a romantic candle lit dinner here. Like, I'm sorry, but what the actual... Why is there a romantic candlelight dinner going on in the middle of World War One? What?
Where's Molly Brown when you need her then?
I know, right? I'm pretty sure the meals they would have would have been more, as you said, like rations, more akin to like what we call MREs nowadays, but I could be wrong. I don't know much about World War One food rations. But I feel like it would have been a precursor to the modern MREs that the military uses these days. It's like, what the lit candlelight dinner? Like, why are you setting this romantic atmosphere in the middle of war? Why?
Why is a good question.
Which is, of course, God's gift to us.
And like most of his gifts, it is unappreciated and often misused.
As I recall, the Bible is filled with stories of God giving his blessing to men who fight for a just cause.
Come now, Townsend, you do not believe all this senseless killing warrants God's approval.
Are you saying he does not approve of courage and sacrifice?
I assure you, I would be willing to do my bit. I realize that as a female, my options are limited. I shall have to content myself with being the woman behind the man.
Without the support of our women at home, I doubt we could win the war. Or even have one.
Men start wars, Chaplain. Women clean up afterwards.
Right here again, because I saw in the Discord chat that Jess showed a real inside photo of the Britannic, and in the photo you could see that there was nurses with hospital beds, and it looks like to me it was in the dining saloon. Now we're going to have to insert that picture right there, I think, because that's what it could have been like inside the dining saloon, probably the first class or the second class dining saloon, and near the promenade decks as well, because I like having the dinner in the movie. It's just more creative licensing, but in the pictures you can actually see what it was like in real life. Jake,
on D deck, in the saloon on D deck, they did say it was quite grand, not grand, but sort of, I suppose in their eyes it would have been sort of grand. So it sort of begs to differ. What sort of luxury did Britannic eventually have as a hospital ship? This is so. What passenger interior did she have, and what she didn't have? This is what the big revelation of the interior Britannic dive is going to reveal, is what was on Britannic and what was taken off Britannic, because there was a time where Britannic was handed back to the White Star Line. In June 1916, she was handed back because casualties were falling and they just couldn't understand or come up with a reason why they would keep Britannic in hospital service. But so it does beg to differ. And within that time, and then, as we know, Britannic was handed back to the Admiralty in August 1916. So in that time, what was added and what was taken off to convert her back into a hospital ship, that's what's going to be the most interesting thing. But what survivors did say is that they had dinner in this very grand, very beautiful dining room on D deck. So it does beg to differ what she did have and what she didn't have as a hospital ship.
Scene does not make any absolute sense whatsoever. Basically, the Germans are wanting to take over the Britannic, and this just does not make any sense.
it doesn't really make any sense, DK, but I'll probably just jump in right there. Even though I think the movie got mixed up with the Lusitania, because the Lusitania, it's known that there were ammunitions on board, But for the Britannic, it's not known if they are or not. But no, actually, tell a lie, because I've done a video script on this already and it's going to come out as a video. That never happened because there was no proof of ammunition on board. But there was one person who thought that they were, based on the number of crates and the body language of the crew members that there were. But Jake, would you like to explain more than that? Because you told a lot of detail to me on what happened. So would you like to explain more?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier that there was an Austrian patient on board the Britannic that had been taken on board the Britannic from another hospital ship. And he said that when he was on board, that he saw crates being put on the Britannic, which he took as probably war contraband, war ammunition. And he did see soldiers. He said he saw British soldiers on board the Britannic that he thought was a bit out of place. And he was just a very much of a complainer of how he was treated on board the ship. But no, there was no ammunition ever found on the Britannic. As I said earlier, Jack Cousteau, who found the Britannic, found no ammunition in the holds of Britannic at all. So no ammunition, no weapons were found on board the ship because, as I said earlier, as a Frenchman, it would have been very interesting to him. It would have been a great interest to him to find ammunition and bullets and everything in the holds of the Britannic, because it would have gave merit for the Britannic to have been sunk by the Germans, because originally people thought that the ship had been torpedoed. There was survivors who said they saw two torpedoes. There was one coming from the starboard side and coming from the port side. It was a kind of a situation of you kind of think you know what you're looking at, but you're not sure what you're looking at. It's kind of your eyes play tricks, because even there was a woman on board the Britannic called Vera Britton, who she wasn't on board the ship when it sank, but she got, I think it was on the 5th voyage, she did get she was transported on the Britannic to Malta. Vera Britton was a very famous author. She wrote a very detailed account of what it was like to be a nurse in the First World War. She wrote a book called Testament of Youth, which became a movie in the end. And she said that when she was on the Britannic, she was always constantly wondering when the Britannic, or was expecting for the Britannic to be attacked. She was always very nervous about being on the Britannic because she was wondering when it was going to happen. We have to remember that this was the First World War, and ships were being sunk left, right, and centre by U-boats. U-boats were a massive threat in the First World War and in the Second World War, and they were sinking tonnage and tonnage and tonnage of ships. And only a year before the Britannic sank, the Lusitania had been attacked. So you can imagine this was playing on their minds all the time, because if a passenger ship could have been sunk, then what's to stop them from sinking an innocent ship like a hospital ship? It was constantly on their minds. So it was the situation of, you think you can see tracks of torpedoes and you ain't. You're not. It's not what you're seeing. As we know, the Britannic was sunk by a mine by pure accident. So that's all I have to say. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Is the Britannic mentioned in the book from the nurse?
Yes, she does mention, not in the book itself. She never mentioned about being on the Britannic. No, but it's a very interesting book, and it's also in a very interesting film, because that movie is very detailed in how it was to be a nurse, a VAD in the First World War.
Okay.
But no, she never mentioned. She did. I think she wrote a poem about it, but Britannic was never mentioned. It was just about being on the ship. I'll have to try and find out the poem for you.
Thanks.
Man, this is one of those iconic shots of the Britannic. Like, if you ever seen a Sleeping Sun video, you would actually see this one or two ways.
The soundtrack for this film is pretty on point. The soundtrack does a good job.
And how was your day?
I've killed a man.
Yes. You must feel awful.
Yes, I do.
Jake is, would there be a brig on the HMHS Britannic basically for any unruly wounded soldiers or nurses or doctors in any shape, way, or form?
I thought there was a padded room on at least one of the sisters. I think Mike Brady did a whole video about Titanic's details, and I'll have to find it again because I thought he mentioned that Titanic actually had a padded room or something, but I don't quite remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to check Mike Brady's video for context, but I don't know if that was the same for Olympic and Britannic.
Oh, they
okay, yeah, they would have used
Okay.
the padded room.
Okay.
Mr. Britannic said it, yeah, they would have used the padded room.
So I kind of find this bothering me so much. Right now, that there are night shots on the Britannic, but yet there are daytime shots when Miss Campbell was going up the stairs. So that's kind of bothering. Oh. Mike again. Gotta quit doing that. Yeah, I kind of find it real odd that these are nighttime shots, but yet there are daytime scenes when Miss Campbell was going up the stairs.
Time travel, apparently.
I think the scares are the grand staircase, what they mean. But they are very wrong. They are not right. This grand staircase. There was a storm.
Jay, can you explain more?
Yep. Sheila Macbeth actually mentions about a particular storm coming out of Southampton. She said that the ship rolled so much that everyone was seasick. Everyone just could not keep their food down. And it was so bad that there was this, what she said, there was this like stairwell. It was more of a ladder. And she said it was very difficult walking up and down it because the ship was rolling so much that it was just, uncomfortable, and you just had trouble walking up and down it. And there was a storm that prevented Britannic from leaving Naples. She stopped at Naples on the 17th of November 1916, and there was a storm that prevented the Britannic from leaving Naples because it was, Britannic was company property. So if the captain did attempt to leave the narrow docks, the narrow harbour of Naples, and damage the ship, he could be in a lot of trouble. So he did not risk it. And by the 19th of November, the storm did die down to a point that they were able to leave Naples. But as soon as they left, the ship started to roll again because the seas rose again. The storm started all over again. And again, Sheila mentions that as well, how again it was very uncomfortable and everyone was seasick, and it was just an uncomfortable situation. So there was storms that did hit the Britannic. And she did roll very violently with the storm, which is interesting because the Britannic and the Olympic class liners were designed to a point that they were built with what they call expansion joints, which was the ship was able to flex over rough seas, and clearly that did not help the nurses and doctors on board when the ship did hit storms, because she did roll very violently and it made them very uncomfortable. In fact, there was one nurse that Violet Jessup had to sort of help her because she was so seasick when the ship struck the mine and the ship was sinking, that she was so useless that Violet had to help her get dressed, so that when she climbed down a ladder or anything, or climbed into the lifeboat, she had some sort of dignity. But again, it was just very uncomfortable. And I think Sheila mentions that everyone at breakfast didn't really touch much of their food because they was just so ill from the storm before. So yeah, it wasn't nice. But yeah, there was storms.
Yep, and also Jess also points out another thing is that the Aquitania was also damaged by a storm as well, and the Britannic actually replaced her to go on that fateful voyage.
8:10 Uhr.
So I just want to explain more. I just want to explain more on that. As DK said, the Aquitania was damaged. Basically, the Britannic had just come back from her 5th voyage, and she wasn't really supposed to go out. I think she went out 2 weeks earlier than she's supposed to have done, or a week early. So she left on the 12th of November 1916, as it said in the film. So I remember reading an account from Ada Garland saying that as they left England, they passed the Aquitania, where she was docked at on the coast of the Isle of Wight, and Ada Garland recollects saying that they were so glad, that they were so pleased that they were not on the Aquitania, that they were on the Britannic, only if they knew what was about to come on that 6th voyage. But yeah, that's what happened. So if history had worked the other way around, we could have been talking about a totally different ship that had sunk, not the Britannic, because if the Aquitania had gone out, she more than likely probably would have sunk on that voyage and not the Britannic. So there was more than one way the Britannic could have been saved from her eventual fate.
There she is, sir. HMS Victoria.
Oh, that is a most pleasing sight, Mr. Townsend. We can breathe more easily.
Let's hope so, sir.
HMS Victoria was not a real ship.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was. She was a real battleship. But the ship had sunk before this. She had sunk if I remember correctly, 1897. She was sunk, and she sunk because she was involved in a collision, and it sunk her. And the wreck is actually standing up on end. So basically, she's not flat on the sea floor. So the bow is in the seabed, but the ship is sticking up in the air.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
So the Victoria is a real ship, but she had sunk by the time the Britannic was around.